Hi, everyone. Welcome to our annual Food Systems Career Panel hosted by the ASU Swette Center for Sustainable Food Systems. Thank you for taking the time out of your Friday to join us. We are so happy to have you here. My name is Audrey. I'm your moderator, and I'm also a student worker at the Swette Center. For those of you who may not know, the Swette Center is a research, education, and policy hub here at ASU, working to create a more equitable, resilient, and sustainable food system. We have many priorities from advancing organic agriculture and researching the true cost accounting of food to educating the next generation of food systems leaders like all of you. We are incredibly fortunate to have a lineup of four accomplished food systems professionals from diverse sectors with us today. After they share their individual experiences and advice, we'll conclude with the Q&A for any specific questions you may have. If you think of any questions during this section, drop them in the Q&A feature below. Now for some brief introductions. Joining us are Lisa Castrichini, Manager of Healthy Foods Initiatives for Local First Arizona, a nonprofit dedicated to strengthening local businesses and communities. Next, we have Nicole Gwishiri, the Women for the Land Southeast Senior Program Manager at American Farmland Trust, a national organization on a mission to protect farmland, promote sound farming practices, and keep farmers on the land. Next up is Katie Hogan, Sustainability Specialist at Shamrock Foods, a family-owned food service company and family of brands, including Shamrock Farms, a nationally recognized milk label. Unfortunately, Katie's feeling a little bit under the weather and still recovering, so she'll have her camera off today, but we're just so fortunate she was still able to make it here to talk to us today. And last but not least is Vinnie Trometter, Policy Manager for the Organic Farming Research Foundation, which seeks to advance organic through scientific research and policy advocacy. And before we get started, I want to give a quick pitch about our graduate programs here at ASU, of which two of our panelists, Lisa and Katie, both happen to be alumni. So if you have any questions about our graduate programs and how it might potentially impact your career, think about those and drop them in the Q&A feature. We offer a one-year graduate certificate in food policy and sustainability leadership and a full two-year master's degree in sustainable food systems, both of which give you the opportunity to build your expertise and advance your career in sustainability and food policy. These programs are all online except for two in-person immersive trips where students come to Arizona for a week to learn directly from food producers, and then we go to Washington, D.C. to meet with policymakers. The director of these programs is Kathleen Merrigan, the executive director of the Swette Center and former deputy secretary of the USDA. Applications are currently open for classes to start in August of this year, and we have scholarships available, so if you're interested, check it out on our website, and we will put the link in the chat to learn more. That's enough for me, so I will jump right into the questions for our panelists. We'll stick to the same order of introductions, so we'll start with Lisa. So Lisa, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current role? What does a typical day on the job look like for you?
Yeah. So I work for Local First Arizona. Like Audrey mentioned, it's a nonprofit. We were formed in 2003, and we are really focused on systems change work. We have community kitchens across the valley. If you go to a farmer's market or you see a food truck, those businesses need to be producing out of a commercial kitchen. And typically what they'll do is go to a commissary kitchen, which has a bunch of small businesses they're renting out space in a commercial kitchen. But those can be very expensive. So our community kitchens offer a commissary kitchen for food entrepreneurs below market rate, and it's a 2-year incubator. So the plan is that they can keep their costs down with our rent, and then that we're giving them technical assistance and helping them thrive. And that after the 2 years, they scale up their company and can really grow. Two of those community kitchens are located in affordable housing communities, and that's where I come in. It's kind of like a quid pro quo. We get reduced rent for those kitchens, but we have to produce services for the residents that live in those buildings. So we do that by offering a bi-monthly choice food pantry. So we don't just give people a food box, they're grocery shopping. We believe food is medicine, so we do a little nudge. All the produce is at the beginning of the market, and then the sweets are at the end. The goal is that they're filling up their grocery carts with fruits and vegetables, and then they just don't have any room for a dessert, or maybe just one dessert. We also offer gardening classes for the residents and cooking classes. We even get to harvest from the garden to the pantry. And then I also lead our cooking classes that tie into food as medicine because it's also nutrition education, and they also get a take-home meal kit. So whatever we make that day for our lesson, they get all those ingredients to take home with them. So they're practicing their skills, but again, it's helping with food access. So a typical day for me is looking at recipes, ordering food, making sure I have enough for the participants. We've been fortunate to receive money from foundations that we could order food for the pantry to help support local farmers and managing volunteers when they come into the pantry and developing our curriculum. We also are big on systems change, like I mentioned. So we are working with other, like the county, Maricopa Department of Public Health, on how we could increase access to healthy foods. And so there's meetings and building coalitions and bringing people together. So that's a typical day for me.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Nicole Gwishiri, and again, I work with American Farmland Trust in our National Women for Land program. And at American Farmland Trust, our goal is to keep farmers on the land. So I work in the Southeast. I live in Kentucky, but our Southeast region covers North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. And in the work that I do, we support women and non-binary or gender expansive folks in getting the resources that they need for their farming operations. We do that by hosting on-farm field day events that are much smaller than cooperative extensions, farmers events. Those are a really cool experience. They are a learning circle is a non-hierarchical learning opportunity where everyone comes to learn, but also are their own experts in the work that they are doing. And so we are transferring knowledge across that circle. And so it's a non-hierarchical way that women and gender expansive folks like to get their information. We also include other technical providers such as cooperative extension.
Uh-oh, Nicole, I think we might be losing you. All right. I think for now, hopefully Nicole's video clears up soon, but for now, why don't we hear from Katie?
Or hi everyone. I apologize for my voice, but my name is Katie Hogan, and I am the sustainability specialist at Shamrock Foods Company here in Phoenix. Shamrock is 103 years old and still private and family owned. Like Audrey said in the intro, we manufacture milk products, cooking oils, we roast coffee, and we also procure, process, and co-pack fresh meat and seafood in addition to food distribution. I've been in my current role for about 10 months, and I'm also the first person at Shamrock to hold a sustainability focused position, which has been both exciting and challenging. Because sustainability is still really an emerging function in a lot of food companies, and especially here at Shamrock, my role is very broad. I essentially lead and coordinate sustainability efforts across the entire enterprise, which means I work with teams all across the business, not just one department. And at a high level, my role is really about integrating environmental and social responsibility into everyday food distribution operations, while also making sure that the work delivers measurable value and long-term return on investment. And in working in industry, those are things that you have to keep front of mind. Sustainability only sticks if it also supports the business, cost savings, risk management, business resilience. And so that balance is really central to everything I do. A typical day, it's hard to define because the role is so cross-functional, but on any given day, I might be working on a company-wide sustainability strategy, looking at food, packaging, energy, and waste, making sure those priorities all align with our business goals and regulatory requirements. A big focus right now is extended producer responsibility, which is rolling out in states like Oregon, Colorado, and California. And I lead that strategy by working closely with our manufacturing teams, packaging, legal, the supply chain, really to ensure compliance while minimizing cost and operational disruptions. Another part of my focus is food waste and supply chain efficiency. So I work with logistics, demand planning teams to help reduce waste. We work on food recovery initiatives through donations and reuse programs. And then when food can't be donated, I also help the company look for ways to convert it into compost, animal feed, or we also sell it for anaerobic digestion. I spend a lot of time on data and reporting, working with ESG related functions throughout the business. And then transportation is also a big part of food distribution. So I work with fleet and logistics on fuel efficiency, cold chain improvements, facility enhancements, and really sustainability, I guess, is very broad as you're kind of seeing in my typical day-to-day air quotes there. But it really only works if people are engaged. So I lead also, well, I'm starting to lead a lot of employee training and behavior change, which is really how everything kind of ties together. So my day to day is really about connecting the dots between operations, data, people, purpose to help the company grow responsibly in a very complex food system.
All right, I'll end it off here. So, Vinnie Trometter, I'm the policy manager at the Organic Farming Research Foundation. Real quickly about us, we've been a leader in organic agriculture research extension and education since 1990. We help fund farmer-led research. We help doing technical assistance for people transitioning over to organic. We help with NRCS with their conservation programs to make them fit within the organic certification. What I do is the advocacy front. So some of the stuff that I do is every day go up on Capitol Hill and talk about organic research, particularly funding out of USDA going to mainly land grant universities, HBCUs, also some nonprofits, organic ag research coming out of ARS. How can we make those programs better? How can, what are the funding needs for these universities and these nonprofits conducting this research? And how does the research pay off for the farmers themselves, both organic and conventional? Now, another thing I do as well is I liaison with the USDA. So if there's any, instances where grants are on hold or funding's on hold, or they're looking for comments on a new regulation. I help, to communicate with them on that and organize people to reach out to them. And another thing I do is, work in an endless amount of coalitions about organic issues to try to move the ball forward on things. And a typical day really involves just lots of emails related to farm bill appropriations, bill sponsorships, letters, getting support for all those things. And then a lot of like digging into like surveys and research statistics and project summaries to see how like a regional or a state organic commodity is being benefited by a particular research program to then emphasize that to a congressional office. There's a lot of other things, but it's a lot of legwork, a lot of keeping tabs of topical policy related movements.
Awesome. Thanks, Vinny. And I apologize, Nicole, that it looks like you got kicked off the Zoom, but I just want to come back to you and give you a chance to finish your answer.
Great, thank you. I don't know where I left off, but our events for our learning circles are really a way to activate our local communities, and we do them all across the United States as we have practitioners in 8 different regions. And then we also work, like Vinnie said, with some 1890 land grants, historically Black colleges and universities, some 1862s, which are the predominantly white institutions, in 1994's, the institutions that serve Native folks. And so we do all of that, and then we really want to move the needle on how all of our participants are able to fully be able to support and participate in these Farm Bill programs. And so the Farm Bill is especially essential to our work and working with our policy folks to be able to create something that will be more sustainable for everybody to be able to participate fully in the U.S. agriculture system. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. And thank you all so much for those insightful answers. Next, could you give us an overview of your background? Where did your career journey start, and how has it led you to your current role? Was there anything surprising that you learned along the way? We'll start with Lisa again.
Yeah, I went to Arizona State University for my undergrad. I got my degree in nutrition and I got a minor in health education, health promotion. And senior year, a professor really encouraged me to sit for the Certified Health Education Specialist exam. I knew I didn't want to be a registered dietitian. I was more concerned about the social issues around food. So I took the exam and then I landed up in SNAP Ed. So SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Ed is education. And at the time, it was bipartisan, and you would go work with communities who would probably be on SNAP benefits, and you would teach nutrition education, but then you would also do some advocacy and policy work within there. And so I did that at City of Tempe and then Honor Health Desert Mission Food Bank. And then I got the opportunity to go to the clinical side of healthcare, where I was wellness coaching people who were making more than minimum wage, but it still isn't a livable wage. And so I was still seeing people wanting to eat healthy, but didn't have the money to do so. A lot of people also don't want to go to a food bank or a food pantry. They feel like they're taking from others. And that's when I really realized policy is super important and food access is something that our country needs to kind of work better at. And then I got a job offer to work for a Head Start program as a health manager. And so Head Start is for children 0 to 5, basically like preschool. It's typically for people who are low income. And as the health manager, with some of the requirements that we have, it's federally mandated that every child has a dental home and a medical home. And so helping the family support specialists and the families that are in the program find a medical home. And if you don't have health insurance, that can be tough to navigate finding a healthcare system that has a sliding scale. We would also do the children's weight and height for their BMI, and the children that were considered obese, I would do a consultation with the families. And again, people know how to be healthy. Everyone knows, like, right, processed food's not great. Soda, we shouldn't drink a lot of it. It's just our systems are not built for people to engage in those healthy behaviors. And then the opportunity came for me to come to Local First. So I think the surprising thing along the way is policy is super important. And that's one reason why I like being a health educator is because advocacy is one of the things that we work on. And the big thing for me is the community doesn't work for me. I work for the community, and just hearing people's stories and what they go through, it makes you think of what food access and what low income really looks like in America. It's not what some political parties think it is. And so that's been the most surprising for me, is just hearing people's stories. People are working multiple jobs and trying to make a living and trying to do the best that they can. And I've been in this for almost a decade, and I've never met someone ungrateful, someone that's been rude or disrespectful. Everyone is just so appreciative of the services that we're able to provide for them.
So my background is in family and consumer sciences education, what we used to call home economics. I got my undergrad degree at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, or North Carolina A&T, which is a 1890 historically Black college. And I began my career teaching high school nutrition, apparel, personal finance, all of those things that are also included in agriculture, but a lot of people see that as like the family side of agriculture. So I taught high school for 6 years. I agree with Lisa that policy is really important, and in the way that we support our teachers, we support our school system with taxes and things like that. It makes it a lot easier to be able to do the work. So in my classroom, we had a lot of Carl Perkins funding, um, which is a national fund for our career and technical students, education and things like that. So our classes were nutrition based, healthy living, all of that. However, most of the time with teaching, the students aren't the like hard part. It's usually administration or parents or, those types of things. And so I was ready to move on, and I got my master's in agriculture education with a focus of cooperative extension. So I also was a family and consumer sciences extension agent and moved to Kentucky and worked for the University of Kentucky for 7 years within a county. And again, like Lisa, we have very similar paths in our work. I worked with Head Start to do nutrition education. I worked with SNAP because part of our funding for a lot of states, and maybe not in Arizona, but a lot of states, their SNAP education is combined with cooperative extension. So some of my work was to do that nutrition education outreach and teaching programs to our community members and things like that. So that was also really cool. But it's hard to move to a place that is not your home and to continue to work. And so just developing a family, children, things like that, my work needed to change. And so when people go through careers and things like that, being flexible, having different aspects of your work leads you to different things. And so I thought I was always going to be a teacher or always going to be an extension agent. And now I work for this national nonprofit that melds the two of working directly with farmers and doing that outreach of like the cottage laws or the food preservation side, getting your food into markets and having that background of a nutrition education background that allows for people to do that. So I've melded a lot of the work that I did teaching high schoolers and community members with the work of directly impacting farmers for new outputs for their produce and things like that, and connecting them with commissaries or commercial kitchens or anything like that. So it was a meandering path to where I am, and just allowing the opportunities to come and to try new things is how I got to where I am.
And next, let's hear from Katie.
Thank you, Nicole. So my career in food systems has been a little more unconventional and really started early. I think when I was about 14 years old, when I first worked at my dad's gas station and convenience store in Oregon. I stocked shelves, ring up customers, wash windows, basically whatever needed to be done. My first official paycheck came from bagging groceries at the local supermarket when I was old enough. And looking back, that grocery store environment really shaped me more than I realized at the time. I'm an extrovert. I love being around people, and I grew up around food. My dad loved to cook, and I was always in the kitchen. And so food and community were connected for me at a very young age. I stayed and worked in the grocery store for a very long time, 3 decades, and moved through a wide range of roles in food safety, labor relations, training and mentoring managers, rolling out operational programs, and eventually I was training future store directors. I spent 13 years as a store director myself, which is essentially the operations manager for that entire location. And over time, I managed dozens of stores and thousands of employees. And as I mentioned, my path was unconventional. So I had gone to community college and taken classes here and there over time, but never finished because I was making good money. I was a career woman at that point, and you just kind of forget about school when you're living that professional life. And I didn't really go back to school until 2019 when I enrolled at ASU out at Morrison, where I did my undergrad in food industry management. And so my career and my education have always been very food focused. So then in 2020, guess what? The pandemic hit. And like many people, it fundamentally changed how I saw the whole food system. I went back into the stores. At the time, I was working a backstage job in labor relations. And I went back into the stores because I felt that's where I could do the most good for my community and for the people that I had worked with and served over the years. But I also experienced a lot of frustration. I couldn't understand why our shelves were empty, why I couldn't feed my community and my family. And I knew food existed. I knew it wasn't a supply problem. And so this was really the wake-up call for me that there was more for me to do and that change needed to happen. I realized I didn't understand the complexity of a local or even national and global food supply chain, or the policies and politics and the systems that shaped them. As I mentioned, I finished my undergrad during the pandemic, which was very challenging and eye-opening at the same time. I became more aware of how much food is wasted in grocery and food service. And I always knew this was always a point of contention for me and something that I really didn't understand the why we couldn't divert food to just to better avenues rather than to the truck that pulls up at the back of your store every day that is the local food bank, but you know what you're giving them. You know what you could have given them could have been much, much better. And so it just became very aware for me at that moment and how truly limited my ability was to redirect that food even to my own employees in need. And so that's really what pushed me to make a humongous pivot. I made the decision to quit my career after 30 years and also to go to grad school at the same time. So two really big decisions. I searched specifically for a graduate program that focused on the food industry and something where I could learn more about food waste and the food supply chain. And that's how I wound up at the Swette Center in the graduate program for sustainable food systems. And it was scary, let me tell you, but I knew that there was more that I wanted to contribute beyond just the grocery store life. And what really surprised me along the way was that none of my experience has been wasted. Operations, people management, crisis response, understanding how food actually moves, all of that became incredibly valuable when I transitioned into sustainability. And this role didn't come from a straight line. It came from lived experience inside the food system. So there's no wasted experience, I guess, is the takeaway. Every role I've had in food and food operations has prepared me for where I am right now.
Um, so on my end, I'll just try to make this as concise as possible. Mother's a chef. We ate really good. Small town in central Pennsylvania. Really like old world, like communities, restaurants, butcher shops, fishmongers. Uh, but the farmers could only really source to our town. We were middle of nowhere. We would travel to like Philadelphia, New York. We would always go to the food markets. Um, I had an interest in international relations, so I went to Penn State, the BA in international relations. Um, Became more, familiar with how to cook because I never learn how to cook for my mother because I always thought I would live next to her for the rest of my life, like a typical Italian American son. So when I got out of undergrad, then I wanted to explore overseas. So I did my master's in Ireland, and that was when I got my first international like experience and also like agricultural experience because it was middle Brexit. And the farmers in Ireland were freaking out about, hey, if there was going to be new customs checks, like how are we going to get our goods to Europe or to the wider market? So we were working with them to essentially figure out new, essentially strategies for any new trade relationship between the Republic of Ireland and the UK. So that was really interesting. That was like my first um, experience on like the ag policy front, and it was a trade related issue. Came back to the US. The world ended, COVID hit. I'm back home, but I'm like picking up a lot of some like financial jobs, learning about like group insurance and things like that. So kind of like in my current role and roles prior, that helped me understand crop insurance, and liabilities, indemnity payments, such like that. Um, so then when COVID waned down, my ultimate goal was to get to Washington, D.C., which is where I'm at now. Um, I'm like, I'm gonna get any job I can and then refine from there. And I think that's a key point. It's like when you're coming out of college, like it is very rare to get a job that is like 100% exactly what you want. Oftentimes what it takes is to just being in the place where you want to get your job. So like when I got to DC, like I was working in like restaurants and stuff while seeking greater employment. I eventually landed a job that was like actually like pretty, relevant to my experience. There was a trade related aspect, but then it was an ag focused issue. Um, and here's the thing too, I was working with uh, a kind of like an issue base where I agreed with it, but it was from a coalition that I had it was a really interesting coalition. Let's just put it that way. Like I just did not expect that these groups where I just didn't think their values would line up to like my values were caring about this particular issue, which I agreed on the same level of this issue with. And that was an interesting experience because it just shows that like if there's 20% of something you agree on, but you don't agree on 80% of the other stuff, you can still work on the 20%. Um, and so basically did that, and then I refined through that job. I was working, picking up multi clients around DC in the agricultural space. So we were working, the main thing we were working on was like animal wellness, um, particularly in the chicken and pork industries. Um, and there was a lot of states' rights aspects involved with that as well. But then like the multi-client stuff I was picking up was like subsidies, like Title I reference prices, ARC and PLC, crop insurance, PFAS, um, conservation payments, EQIP, uh, NRCS stuff. Um, so a lot of things that, I had enough knowledge to be able to build off of, but it was something that like I had to kind of roll with the punches. But here's the thing, in a lot of advocacy spaces, like that's okay because as long as you can like say as long as you can explain the chunk, the meat of the issue, very easily to understand. Um, in DC, like you talk with staff members in congressional offices, like they might work on agriculture, but then they have nine other issues they're also working on. So like they can't be experts on everything. So like just being able to communicate um, at a very easy to understand basis, like what this issue is about, why it's important, and what you can do about it. That's the basic thing you got to know how to do. Like, and and the further you work in that, the more you learn about it. And then, of course, you bring people along who are the big experts on stuff like that. But 9 times out of 10, it's staff members who are like, explain this to me in 30 seconds. Okay, here it is. Here's what you can do about it. My boss likes this type of issues. Um, we'll reach out to you when we need to, so on and so forth. So it's a lot of like um rolling with the punches. And if you're good at that, then like, especially if you're in DC, you're in got a good posture about you. But I think like the and all of these things, like I didn't expect I would be working where I'm in now in organic ag research, and how I landed in organic ag research, which, one of the things I'm sure you're wondering is like once I kind of got an understanding of the agricultural system on the conventional side and a lot of the structural challenges that farmers face. I'm like, this is just not a sustainable path forward for a lot of these guys. And, then, I in my work, I was meeting a lot with ag researchers and people who advocate about agriculture research. And they were like, this is like ag research is bar none one of the best ways to increase farmer profitability, farmer production. And I really love that because like, made sure to wear my Arizona State colors today, but I'm a Penn State grad and I'm a diehard Penn State guy. And so like I love my university and I love like, a lot of this research is coming out of universities. So like that was one thing, but then like organics, learning more about that, talking to a lot of people in that space, it's like, yeah, like we are complete. What you see that you're shocked about, like we don't have to deal with a lot of that. We grow our stuff completely different. We raise our animals completely differently. Our processing and labeling is completely different. Um, we're not subject to foreign inputs from, fertilizers or pesticides that spike every year when there's a conflict. It's, we're insulated from a lot of that risk. And meanwhile, it also improves soil health. It, helps with, production in drought conditions. It helps abate erosion in wet conditions. Um, all these other things. And I'm like, this is great. And putting together the research aspect, I'm like, this is perfect. So it's a lot of snowballing. So, just be open to what life leads you. Just I would say a one thing to keep in mind is, and this is something that's surprising, is you'll find in the sustainable ag space, you'll find allies which you would be shocked with. Like why would this person be an ally of sustainable agriculture? Or like sometimes you find people who you think would be, but they aren't. And that's also surprising. But I would say a pleasant surprise, uh, which is less a surprise because it's becoming more mainstream. Organic is becoming more mainstream, and I think it's surprising. Let's just say this that folks that um, especially on the right, don't who wouldn't really think much about like being sustainable minded. Like they're becoming advocates of sustainable agriculture um, from, constituents who are just concerned about food quality or like concerned about, um, you know, uh, farmer, protecting, keeping farmers on the land and making sure that farmers aren't just being bought out and stuff like that. So like really like the people who are new allies or newly open-minded to sustainable agriculture and organic often become open-minded or advocates um, in ways that like you totally would not expect. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Vinny, and thanks all of you guys. Your answers really showcase the diversity of experiences available within food systems, so that was really great. Um, and finally, I'm sure there's a lot of students here on this call, students and early professionals. So, for students aspiring to enter a similar career, what advice would you offer? And we'll start off with Lisa again.
Right. I saw one of the Q&As kind of similar to this. So you don't have to be a health professional. Like if you wanted to go into food access work, there's people who are food health professionals that do that work. It's when you're kind of going more into nutrition education, some organizations might want a health educator or a registered dietitian leading those conversations or a nurse. But there's some organizations who you really, all you have to do is follow a curriculum. If you can follow a curriculum and not deviate and say, like, I saw this on TikTok, as long as you stay with a curriculum and you're using evidence-based sources, I think you're good to go. So that would be my suggestion is if you're not a health professional, you can still go in this avenue. I really highly recommend volunteering at different organizations. We always need volunteers at our pantries. So you can always volunteer and get more exposure. When I first was starting out, I was just teaching kids. There was a local nonprofit and they were doing lessons for adults. And I was like, can I teach a cooking class? And they bought all the ingredients for me. I just showed up and developed a little simple lesson on whole grains. And then that kind of got me more experience I could put on my resume. Like, no, I have taught adults before. So I think just reaching out to nonprofits, they love people working with them and they don't have the funds or the capacity to do it themselves. So putting yourself out there in that type of way is super beneficial. And your LinkedIn, I think, is a great way to continue building your profile. If you have a really great LinkedIn, I think it goes a long way. And yeah, that's my recommendations.
So I would say as having a background in family and consumer sciences education and like in cooperative extension, I'll echo some of what Lisa said. You can always volunteer with your cooperative extension offices. Cooperative extension happens to be in all 50 states and usually have an office in each county, whether there's an agent directly in your county that might be a family consumer sciences agent or family and healthy living agent to get that experience for health education if that's what you're looking for. But also, if y'all have some clubs on campus, for example, Manners, Minorities in Agriculture and Natural Resources and Related Sciences, they do a lot of outreach for students, and they don't only select minorities. And so that's a great. I just came back from the Manners conference that was in Dallas last week and was really impressed by some of the students, and they get internships all of the time with different companies, whether that's John Deere, you're looking to do sustainability with them, or like Chick-fil-A or other organizations that directly impact food. And so therefore, I would just suggest that, like Vinnie said and others, that take any opportunities that you can. My background to leading into nonprofit, what helps is an education degree. So because that translates to a lot of different avenues of work. However, you have transferable skills. And so connecting, if you're looking at a job that you want to do, connecting your experiences now with the job title. It doesn't have to be specifically in that background. And then connect with people at that organization. So if you want to look at American Farmland Trust website, we always are hiring. If you need somebody to look at your resume, I'm happy to do so. And if you need a connection, same there. So I'll pass it to the next person.
Thanks, Nicole. My advice for students is find the overlap between what you're passionate about and what you're really good at. So find the balance between your passion and your experience. And sustainability for me isn't just a passion, it's really turned into something that's solving real world problems inside food systems. And I think that's what we're all fighting for. I think it's also important to understand that sometimes change happens by working from the inside out. Just as Vinnie had mentioned, you may not land that glamorous sustainability job right out of college, but that's okay. Be persistent, be professional, work on your craft, be empathetic to those around you. Know your personal values because those will help guide your decisions when things get really complicated. I think that's probably the number one takeaway is to really know who you are first so that when you get out there, you are able to communicate that passion and translate it into measurable outcomes. Networking is very critical, just as Lisa mentioned, your LinkedIn profile, but I would also challenge you beyond that. Try to get out there and connect with other sustainability or like-minded people that are in your realm outside of the traditional pathways. Right now, I'm trying to put together just a sustainability professionals coffee chat where we're meeting quarterly just to talk. Sometimes that's helpful. You really don't realize how complex the issues are until you're sitting face to face with someone or having to prepare for a court case, and you really need to become the subject matter expert. And so I think leaning into your network is really helpful. That I think is the value that I've taken away from grad school is developing those relationships, not just inside, but also outside of, now that we've all graduated. And when it comes to internships, I would say treat them like a really long interview. Don't just apply for those big, corporate jobs. Sometimes you end up just being a number and you really minimize the impact that you can make. Uh, Smaller, less obvious roles can give you more responsibility, more learning, more impact early on. And if you're passionate, then I think you can accomplish anything that you want. Just in my role, just this morning, I had a meeting right before this with legal, and we are getting ready to um, be part of a lawsuit in Colorado challenging some regulations. And so legal told me this morning that we're really counting on you to be the expert for us, Katie. And so that's a lot of pressure, but also I am so happy to do it because this is what I've been preparing my whole life for. Everything I've done has helped me prepare for where I am today. And so don't discount yourself. I saw someone put in the chat that they're a federal contractor and it's very difficult looking for work in this administration. You know what? Yes, and we face those challenges, but don't give up. It's a short term, it's a short term pause, maybe in the administration, but that doesn't mean it's a short term pause for the fight, right? We're building our sustainable food systems army, and we need everyone out there giving it their best, regardless of where you come from or what school you went to or what your background is. So you don't have to start in sustainability to make a difference. You just start where you can learn the system and then you can change it.
Um, okay, so I'm putting a couple of things in the chat here. So here's some great ways to break in. Let's start from the bottom. If you're interested in federal policy, get to DC. Just you don't have to come to DC with a job. You will find a job. You might have to start off just something to keep your cash flow going, like working at a restaurant, working at a bar, but you're going to meet people. There's tons of free events that you can get to network and, figure out how to link your passions with a potential job opening. If you're interested in the state side or you just don't want to, leave your home, your area, that's fine. state level food issues that are very salient. Like in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, dude, there is crazy amount of state policy food work out there. But you got to get to Harrisburg because that's where all that work is. Now you can also work at like, more of your statewide, food nonprofits. You could work at the Sweetie Center. You could work at, your local, your state farm bureau or national farm or your state farmers union chapter or so on and so forth. Um, there's a lot of options even within your own state. But, make sure you're reaching out to them is what I'm trying to say. Um, Now, another thing is if you're going to, if your interest is federal policy, um, I will say two things. One, all right, uh, great job board. I always recommend this to people looking for jobs. Um, it's called Brad Traverse. It's like $5 a month, but it's the marquee DC advocacy job board in existence. It's really user friendly. It's just a list of policy, advocacy, campaign, whether you're working on the Hill, administration, you can break it down from environment to legal, defense, like all these different categories, and it'll shoot out jobs, and it takes jobs from Indeed, the House and Senate Bulletin Board, individual organizational job postings and puts them all onto one bulletin board. Every interview I've ever gotten was from that website. Um, Now, another one is called Food Policy Pathways, a great mentorship program for folks wanting to get into food policy. Essentially, you reach out to them and they'll they're like teaming you up with like a mentor. But then they also give you like strategies to like when you're seeking jobs, like, hey, here's a spreadsheet of name, job, the job application, who's the contact, have you followed up with them, like really easy ways to um, make getting a job your job until you get one. You know what I'm saying? Um, and they also hold events all across DC where you're, meeting with fellow folks who are looking for a food policy job. And then they're also bringing in like, people who work at food nonprofits, environmental nonprofits, like ag labor nonprofits, food companies, trade associations, congressional staff members, stuff like that. So like there's a great way to, meet people and network through that mentorship program. Um, and the job board for the attendee of the question here is called Brad Traverse. I think Jane just put it into the chat. Um, and but yeah, would highly recommend if you're looking like federal. They have some state level stuff, but like it's 90% of it's like federal. And the state level stuff is mainly like regional congressional offices and campaign jobs. Um, that's within a state. So I would say those are my just grass tops advice. And I will leave with two things. One, um, whoever you reach out to in networking, I always kind of make it, especially when you're trying to find a job, a rule to um, touch base with them at least once a month. Even if they don't have anything, just send them an email just saying, hey, hope you're doing well. Here's what's new in my life. Hope we can connect soon. Another thing I do as well is essentially making sure that if I do get a job or someone else is looking for a job and I know of the person or the organization that might be suitable for their interests, help them because what comes around goes around, what goes around comes around. And like people like that. It's a good thing. It's good in your own human development to help people. And like I would do it without any expectation of something happening, but like um, oftentimes we're rewarded for doing good deeds. So I'll leave it at that.
Wow, thank you all so much for sharing your really thoughtful answers and advice. That was really great. Hearing your career journeys and experiences shows just how much this sector has to offer. And even though we only have a few minutes left, we'll now open up a Q&A for any questions. If there's anything specific you'd like to ask any of our panelists, please send it in through the Q&A feature on Zoom. Please use the Q&A feature and not the chat feature. There is a higher likelihood we will get to your question if you use the Q&A feature. So go ahead and pop your questions down below, and I'll read a couple off to our panelists. Everyone's questions answered already? I see that Patrice said, great panel. Thanks to each of you. Great information. Thank you, Patrice. It's good to see you here. Okay, I'm not seeing a lot coming in from our Q&A. So with our last few minutes, I'll just ask you guys a little bit of a backup question. I would love to know, are there any sustainability trends in your sector that you think early career professionals should be paying attention to right now? That's just a broad question. You guys are welcome to answer and share your thoughts, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, one I have that pops right into my mind is the beef industry right now is going through um, a lot of change, a lot of supply and sustainability issues. I was at a meeting with JBS last fall where they are looking to stand up regenerative ranching programs near a lot of their beef sheds. And so I think that is something, an industry where you have to fight from the inside out. A lot of us think or have opinions of the beef industry and how they contribute to the greater food system. But they're going to need a lot of help over the next 5 to 10 years figuring out how to keep prices down while maintaining a supply for not just the US, but really for the world.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. I'm also seeing a question coming in for you from Beatrice, who asked, did Shamrock create the position and have you needed to adapt to that role? Have you had issues with the reception of ideas?
Um, so Shamrock created the position a week after I finished grad school because they were facing some regulatory burdens and no one on staff that was, I guess, interested and or educated. And so I kind of uh, raised my hand and said, sure, I would be happy to help you with these things. And really, that's what I wanted to do all along. That was my mission going to Shamrock, was to change the culture. And I knew that I wanted to be there and I wanted to bring sustainability to the company. So, real quickly, I have an email that I sent to myself 2 years ago with my goals for Shamrock. And that email has one line and it says, 1 year from now, I will be Shamrock's sustainability expert and will help them stand up their program and start educating. And here I am a year later, helping that come true. So if you can dream it, it can happen.
Nice. Thank you, Katie. That was really inspiring. Vinny, I'm sorry if I cut you off. Would you like to answer that question about sustainability trends?
Yeah, I would just very briefly say implementation of AI. I mean, I'm in the research space. That's something that's really um, I would say being prioritized in terms of awarding federal dollars. Um, and there's I have a lot of mixed opinions about AI. However, I think that there is going to be adoption, whether, we like it or not. And I think some aspects of AI implementation in terms of things like weed management, soil health, um, robotics, and stuff like that, are promising. And but it's just, there's some ethical stuff around it. But I think that's something that should definitely be aware of because it's a very swiftly growing innovative sector in agriculture.
Thanks, Vinny. Yeah, that's a really good answer. Yeah, AI is definitely transforming the way that we do things. Um, I also see that Paula asked a question for all of you. Do any of you have advice for a person with years of experience in school food administrative? Um, it says distraction, but maybe that's meant to say, I'm not sure. But do any of you advice for a person with years of experience in school food administration, a chef, an MPA for pivoting to getting into more foodways policy?
I would say there's a lot of like local food procurement um, policy, like coming out of USDA. Um, there's grants that are that pertain to institutional food procurement. Um, there's also stuff with food banks and stuff. But Lisa, and it sounds like you work a lot in that space, so I'll let you answer.
I was going to say farm to school, I think would be a perfect avenue for that because it's hard to get schools on board. And if you have that experience being a food service administrator, you know it's difficult to feed all those children with the budget you have. So I think farm to school would be a great avenue for this person.
Yeah, all great answers. Thank you guys so much for your advice. And it looks like that's about all of the questions we have in our Q&A, so we can go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you all for your engaging questions and for your participation. This brings us to the end of this event. One final huge thank you to our panelists who took the time to do this. It was such a privilege to learn from you all. And thank you to everyone who attended. I hope you're all leaving today having learned something valuable. We will be sending out a recording of this event and links to learn more about our graduate programs if you're interested. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.